IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I am here with Tashishila's Tech Division. We have gone from a team to becoming a division. That's right. It's me and Prateek here on All Things Policy today, and we are going to talk about this recent ad ban that Facebook has been facing. So the context basically is that a lot of companies have gone ahead and banned ads on Facebook, given what the current political climate is like in the US, and also just how Facebook has been responsible for spreading misinformation and hate. And that's why they have stopped advertising on these on platforms owned by Facebook. And it's actually been a lot of the news if you follow tech policy at all. So that's where we are currently. The boycott hasn't ended yet, and we have the group is called Stop Funding Hate. Oh no, that was the older group, right? This is
Stop Hate for Profit. Yeah, it's about
Stop Hate for Profit.
Yeah, about 1,100 companies, I think, as of 8 or 12 hours ago, based on some tweets that I saw.
Yeah, and it's I'm actually quite stunned because it's one of those ways that companies can be held accountable. Apart from, let's say, the other way was intermediate liability and holding these companies accountable for what people post on them. But this is another, let's say, very nuanced way of telling them that what they do matters, and this is why this is probably one of the best tools to hit them where it hurts. Or this is something we'll get into later, but I don't think it hurts Facebook as much. It hurts other people. But that's where we are at actually, and I want to talk about why this has happened in the first place. There's a very strong hate speech argument to consider here, and I think all of us are familiar with it. Instead, let's talk about misinformation, because we have Prateek and myself on. So let's talk about misinformation and information pollution in general. Prateek, can you expand on what the misinformation angle is apart from hate speech here?
Yeah, so just to take a step back, right? So what's basically happening, right, as you mentioned, right, with a lot of companies sort of putting pressure on Facebook, the way they've responded has actually been sort of interesting. Nick Clegg has, I think, made statements to the effect of, that Facebook is essentially a mirror to society. And the other quote was, I think, the very commonly used sunlight is the best disinfectant kind of argument, right? And I was recently reading this book called You Are Here, right, by Whitney Phillips and Ryan Milner, which is quite an interesting approach that they've taken to the whole information ecosystem in that, right? They look at what we are doing and how we're interacting with information as a metaphor of, using the metaphor of environmental pollution, right? And basically saying that how you interact with the information ecosystem creates pollution, right? And one of the aspects that they covered on, and they specifically touched upon this argument of sunlight being the best disinfectant, right? And they sort of hypothesize that it comes from two frames, right? One is the liberal frame, and the other is the social justice frame, right? Now, in the former, what happens is that you're trying to focus on those doing the harm, right? With the hope that society will reject it. So that's your, exactly the situation that we hear, that you focus on the people who are perpetuating racist content, etc., hateful content, and with the hope that society will ultimately stand up to it and call out the bad actors. The other angle that they've looked at it is from the social justice angle, which is you're focusing on those who are actually harmed and affected by these, right? And then with the intent that once society sees that, they will collectively act to take the necessarily structural changes that need to happen, right? So Facebook is taking the former approach here, right? And you can actually see that what the call from the civil society groups is actually stemming from the latter approach, right? So it's an interesting conflict that's playing out there. The other aspect of this to keep in mind is that from observation that we've seen that sometimes taking this approach of sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? What actually happens on these platforms is that the same power structures continue to get amplified, right? So instead of just having it being a purely equal marketplace for ideas, right, that term is commonly used, what ends up happening is that the same power structures reinforce themselves even on these on these platforms, right? And that's precisely what we've been seeing with Facebook and social media in general.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that Nick Clegg thing you said, and tied together that whole thing with power structures as well. The idea is that Facebook is a mirror to society, and this is something that I talk a lot about with one of my friends who's pursuing a PhD in London on international relations, and she says that she hates big data, and the argument is that big data is one of those things that reinforces how society exists today. And the similar train of thought with Facebook is that Facebook just is a mirror to society. It looks at how things are and it just puts them online. I mean, the problem with both of those things are that there's a difference in just having society exist as it is and having Facebook as a mirror to it. Because if we can actually look and quantify where society, how it exists, maybe there are some things that we can change to make us just better as people. And here, I mean, instead of actually pursuing that particular ideal, we've actually gone ahead and tried to put this in front of society multiple times. And to me, it looks like this is where it comes to sort of a reckoning of sorts, right? I mean, the idea is that, well, maybe it's about time that things as they have been existing for so long are simply not working, and it's about time we do something about it. And the fact that it's taking so long is a completely different story. But this ad boycott in particular, I felt it was a bit, I don't know, I felt like it was addressing, let's say, the wrong symptoms, the wrong cause. The idea here is that, the ad boycott called for a bunch of things, I feel like the boycott itself is actually fairly convenient. Because it's the pandemic, not a lot of people are spending, so these companies actually have all of these companies who are boycotting.
So just to clarify, when you're saying convenient, you mean for the companies to participate or for people, civil society groups to call for it? I think it's important to make that distinction.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. I meant the companies that are participating, such as Unilever or Coca-Cola or Starbucks, for that matter, because people aren't spending a lot at these companies because, well, there is a pandemic. And so what you have here is that these companies also sort of want to cut down costs and limit their advertising. And this particular campaign is actually a great way to do that by also saying that, look, we are doing the right thing. This is what was supposed to be done. We support these particular values. And this is why we support this boycott. I feel like that's a convenient excuse to be a part of this. But regardless of that, I mean, the campaign itself has called for a bunch of things, right? The question of what exactly do these advertisers want is that they're going to start with hiring a C-suite level executive with civil rights expertise to evaluate products and policies for discrimination, bias, and hate. And then they also ask Facebook to submit regular third-party independent audits of identity-based hate and misinformation. Now, to some extent, Facebook already does this, right? They have a chief diversity officer that, to some extent, addresses the first point. And there has been an audit of Facebook itself that took over 2 years to complete. And well, there's also a part where they want their money back and stuff. But just looking at the steps that they're asking Facebook to take, I feel like these already have been happening at Facebook. It's not like Facebook has been just riding the waves without actually doing something about it. There have been things that have been done. The problem is that there is margin for error at most fronts. And the problem with Facebook is that because it's so big, even the smallest margin for error can actually mean, let's say, hundreds of thousands of people or thousands of people. And that's where the problem lies. The platform is extremely big. And the other flip side of this is that if the platform wasn't big enough, they wouldn't be advertising here on the first place. So I don't think it's as black and white as to say that this boycott is asking for the right recommendation. I support the reasons for the boycott, but the way that it's trying to go about fixing stuff has already been happening to some extent, and it hasn't been effective for a reason. And that underlying reason is something that hasn't been addressed as much.
And how effective do you think this is going to be? The movement is actually going to be, given the profile of advertisers on Facebook, right? I understand most of it is small and medium business. There's a very long tail there, right? I was reading somewhere, I think that I think the top 100 advertisers account for less than 20% of revenues, which basically it's a very, very, very long tail.
Yes.
Right. So unless you have a lot of advertisers actually participating far higher than the 1100 number that we have today. Right? Again, and it's not necessarily that everyone declares it, right? Some of them might do it quietly as well. Until that happens, I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make on Facebook's bottom line. Yes, it's certainly a PR problem, but they've been having PR problems for the last 4 or 5 years, right? Constantly. So I think it's almost business as usual for them, I think, to deal with these kind of problems.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things that I want to point out here. Firstly, regardless of what we say here, Facebook actually has the data on how many people are going to advertise or not going to advertise, right? And historically, the way this platform, a company has behaved is that they look at a lot of these debates happening around them. They wait for it to blow over, and usually it does. And they are able to keep a very accurate finger on the pulse and say that, well, this is how it's shaping up. And secondly, as you mentioned, if this was, let's say a cable news channel, right? And if 5 advertisers actually decided to drop out, that would be a huge deal for the news channel. Facebook, on the other hand, they can afford to lose out these advertisers because the thing is that there are millions of them. Small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, you name it. So this doesn't mean a lot as far as the revenue is considered. So to Facebook, it's not a lot, especially considering there is every chance that these advertisers are going to come back, because where else are they going to go? Bottom line is that advertising is effective, especially on Facebook. You won't get the same results on Twitter or Reddit, and Facebook knows that. So right now, if it just decided to engage in some virtue signaling and hold out, I think they would tide over this very nicely.
Yeah, I think the estimate is that from some analysts, the estimate is that it will probably affect less than 5% of their revenues, if at all. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a lot. And plus that is likely going to come back. So, but there's also, we had this happening earlier when I misspoke the name of the older campaign, which is, Pratik, could you please help me out here because I'm horrible at this?
Stop funding hate. Yeah, that was an interesting one. So that's started from a UK-based group of civil society orgs, right? And interestingly, it ended up even calling for, in India, it part of it reached India, and they basically said, stop funding Op India, right? To the extent that some advertisers did actually ask for their content to not be advertised on it. Rubicon Project, which is an ad network, I believe unlisted Op India from their inventory of websites. But then what happened in these situations is that you're able to play the victim card and call for donations, call for contributions. Right? So it's again that it brings up a very interesting dichotomy that you face, right, in these situations. That pushback is important, right? You need to push back against hateful content. But we also have to realize that pushback itself is fraud. And I should claim that's not an original statement. I have borrowed that very shamelessly from Whitney Phillips' tweet from last night. But it really resonated with me, right? Because you need to push back on these sort of things. But it's important to keep in mind that if you look at second order effects, how the reaction is going to be, and potentially prepare for that as well, right? And again, this is a recent example, right? I think going back to 2017, 2018, there was also a similar situation with YouTube, where a lot of advertisers wanted to basically stop having their ads displayed around racist and white supremacist kind of content, right? I think some of them threatened to pull their ads from YouTube. YouTube made some changes. They came back. Fast forward today, we still have hateful content on YouTube. Not much has changed. Even going back, I think, to 2013, 2014, right? I think there was a campaign that called for a boycott of Google, because they used to advertise. So I think about 50 companies were called out for advertising on pirate websites and websites that promote piracy. So a lot of music labels, etc., got together and wanted to mobilize some sort of action around that. Right? So we've seen this in different forms over the years, right? I think Google, in fact, as part of their transparency reports, does a bad ad section, right, where they talk about ads that are on problematic websites or problematic ad content, and the one that they can sort of pull down as well. So this has been around in some shape or form for many years now, right? What it's interesting to see how it sort of reached a fever pitch now. But yeah, it's going to be important to see how effective it actually remains in the long run, right? But I'm going to sound like the cynic here, but looking at past experience, right, of similar campaigns, it seems like it may just people are just waiting to tide by and waiting for things to blow over, and then we'll be back. We may just be back to where we are today or where we were 2 months ago.
I'm actually very happy that you brought up the term unintended second order effects, because this particular boycott, as well as the others, have also second order effects on not just Facebook, but the broader tech space in general. Because you have, let's say, companies like Twitter or Snap, who will now struggle to differentiate themselves from Facebook, or even Reddit for that matter. Because the problem is that not all advertisers react to all these things the same way. You have a lot of people who basically say that, well, we're going to stop advertising on social media. And that handicaps a lot of Snap and Twitter, because they can't afford to have a lot of advertisers to stop pumping money into their platforms. This is something that's going to hurt them more than is going to hurt companies that are as big as, let's say, Facebook and Google. And I just thought...
And I think you're right about that. Facebook is in many ways the face of this movement, but it applies to all these user-generated content, all these social media sites.
Yeah, and these unintended consequences will most likely end up shaping how social media evolves over time. Because from what I heard recently, Twitter was actually planning to move to a subscription model to differentiate itself from Facebook, I assume. Where if you have a certain number of followers, you'll have to start paying to have an account on Twitter. Which I don't know how that's going to turn out, but all of this is actually going to have very real consequences on how we use these platforms. Maybe not for Facebook because, but for Twitter and Reddit, I think it's going to be extremely painful. Also, I don't want to pay for my legions of followers on Twitter, all 252 of them. It's not going to be nice. And what incentive do I have to stay there?
Well, I'm hoping at our legions of followers, I don't think we'll be affected.
Well, let's hope so. And,
even if that happens.
Yeah. On that very optimistic note, for a change, let's end this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. And also, please follow us on Twitter if you've been listening to this. I'm at The Statist and Prateek is at
Prateek Wagre.
All right. Have a nice one.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. It's been a really, really cool week on the network. We've had Ashwin Sanghi on Cyrus Says. We had Masaba Gupta on Advertising is Dead. You should definitely check out Vivek Lath, who showed up on Storytellers and Story Sellers. A close friend and partner of ours, Karthik Paricha, was on the Pragati podcast talking about the future of podcasting, which I think is only really interesting. And I would like to ask people to check out All Things Policy and what they've been doing. They've been having some really interesting discussions about India's challenging relationship with China as we go forward, and I think that would be a great thing for you guys to check out. So with that, we hope to see you again next week.
Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills, from health to relationships, from mental well-being to emotional well-being, and of course your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.